Recording in progress. Well, happy Monday, everybody. I know we're all gearing up for recruitment season, fun time of year. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the Clinical Competency Committee. If you haven't met me, if I haven't met you, my name is Melissa Keller. I am the current president of AFMA. I am, in my job in the real world, I am the executive director of GME for Prisma Health over Greenville and Columbia, South Carolina, where I have 5 family medicine programs in my team. And I've been a program administrator for over 15 years now, started in surgery and moved to family medicine back in 2017 and helped start a program in Ohio before I moved south. So had a little bit of experience all over the place in my career in GME. But we're going to talk a little bit about the Clinical Competency Committee today. And I'd like this to be interactive. I'd like you to speak up if you have any questions. I'd like to start with how many of you, and you can just raise your hands, have done CCCs already, have already done a CCC. Anybody? Yeah, I see a few. Okay. Okay. All right. And so I'm going to lean on you all too to talk about your best practices if you've already done CCCs, and we'll get to that. But we're also going to talk a little bit about the history of the CCC. Surprisingly, it was not around when I started in GME. We did not have milestones when I started in GME. As a matter of fact, my program was a beta tester for the milestones for surgery when they were first coming out. And I'll tell a story about that when we get to it. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the CCC. We're going to talk about the core functions of the CCC, and we're going to talk about some best practices. And that's where our experienced people on the team, I'd like you to pipe in and talk about what you do and what works for your team, because we all, as you know, have different programs, different sizes, different locations, faculty all over the place, faculty all together. So we all have different issues that we deal with within this. So these are the objectives. So we'll describe the historical development and the purpose of the CCC. We'll talk about the core functions and responsibilities, and we'll apply best practices. So like I mentioned, it hasn't always been around. When I started back in 2010, there were not milestones. The competencies had been introduced. They were introduced pre-2013. And then in 2013, Dr. Nasca was the president of the ACGME at the time, introduced the next accreditation cycle or system. And that's when things that happen, like your PECs happened, your CCCs, the clear visits came out of that, and the milestones came out of that. And they formed these working groups to build these milestones for all the specialties. And they rolled them out kind of piecewise. Starting in 2014, they started rolling them out, and then they became absolutely deadline. You had to do them in 2019 for all programs. So it hasn't been that far in the past that we've had to do clinical competency committees and do milestones. And my experience was our former program director for surgery had been on the milestones committee for the ACGME for surgery. And so she reached out and asked if we'd be willing to beta test them. And so we get them and we hold a CCC. And at the time I had 9 per class in a surgery residency. So I had 45 surgery residents. And we sat down and we did the milestones for our PGY5s because we figured we knew them the best and it would be the fastest way to try these milestones out. And it took us 4 hours to do our first set of milestones. And that's when we realized that we were going to have to come up with a way to review 45 residents in a way that made sense, that gave them good feedback, and that really did play into what they could do, what they couldn't do based on the competencies. So it also meant looking at our evaluations and how are our evaluations structured? Did they feed into those core competencies? And then it also was, how do we set up our clinical competency committee to make it a best practice and make it easier? And I'll talk about what we did later on. But kind of the behind the scenes of why we went to the milestones and why this came about. And it was because of the competency-based medical system. It was becoming more outcome focused and less time-based focused. And yes, we're still on a time base right now for residencies, but in the future, this may not be so. It may be competency based where you're progressing along the competencies and you get to graduate after a certain amount of time. It was patient-centered. It aligned with the training in real-world healthcare, talking about professionalism, talking about being part of the interdisciplinary teams, part using your systems-based practice to navigate the medical system. So it was all of those things together. So it was real-world needs. And then it was also very clear and transparent. So you had these transparent steps to get to where you needed to be through the milestones and then the EPAs that came out as well. Some of the key benefits you can see here, it's personalized learning, so you can you've got a resident who's nailed their medical knowledge, right? And they've nailed their patient care, but maybe they're not good at interpersonal communication, or maybe they're not good at professionalism. Lord knows we have a bunch of those. So you can personalize it so you can see where their dips and miles are, where their dips and needs are, and you can adjust their education to make that, right? It's continuous feedback. So it's supposed to promote continuous feedback to see if they're progressing through the levels, as opposed to, yes, you can do XYZ procedure. It's how can they do it? Can they do it on their own? That kind of thing. It's improved readiness. When these graduates progress through the milestones, you can see where they are. You can see if they're ready to graduate. Are they at those level 4s and they're ready to hit the ground running and practice on their own? And then again, it ensures public trust, which right now public trust in healthcare is, kind of on the downhill slide. So we need that. The core competencies are, their knowledges, their skills, their attitudes, and their behaviors. And then the milestones are the observable markers. And with the family medicine milestones, each program, each specialty is a little bit different. If you've looked at ortho milestones, for example, those are very specific to ortho, and they're very specific to things like hip replacements and knee replacements, whereas ours are more about the actual whole body. How do they take care of the patient? How do they navigate through the system is less focused on that. So if you ever get a chance, I suggest you look at other milestones and see how they look compared to family medicine. It's quite interesting to see this. So the core functions of the Clinical Competency Committee. So if y'all want to come off mic, what do you guys review at your Clinical Competency Committee? Anybody?
We talk about residents that are having issues and their evaluations if they came in low. Any kind of professionalism issues.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, you do the milestones, correct?
Correct. And a semi-annual review opposite the milestones every quarter.
What else do you guys review? Is there anything else? Anybody else review other things?
We also review test scores and scholarly activity.
Okay. Anybody else? Thanks.
We do all of that, and we also check their clinic stats and just patient encounters, procedures, just to make sure they're on track with all that.
Right.
Just modules, anything like that.
Yep. So I think we all get caught up in the milestones, right? That's kind of what we're there to do. But there are quite a few things you can look at. So obviously you're going to look at the evaluations, right? This is what's going to feed into your milestones and help you make those decisions as to where those residents are. Procedure logs, like you said, making sure they're on track to graduate, making sure they're on their clinic hours, especially those that have had leave, tracking how far they are, where they are. Continuity data, hours in the clinic, et cetera. After that 6-month mark, do you guys look at that to make sure they're ready to use the modifier? That's one thing you can do. Scholarly activity, somebody mentioned. If your program allows moonlighting, this would be the ideal place, right? To look at, are they ready to moonlight? I don't know how many programs allow that, but that's an area to do that. Duty hour compliance, again, that's part of professionalism, but you could look at that there as well. One of the things that I think we've really tried to reinforce at our institution is goes with our JCO certification, but we have a privilege portal in our management system. And so we encourage our programs at the June, before they do the June milestones, to look at those privilege portals and make sure those residents are updated and ready to go for the next academic year. Like, what privileges are they allowed? What procedures are they allowed to do on their own? What are they allowed to do on with supervision, et cetera. And then, the core function of the CCC per the ACGME is to provide feedback back to the PD for the semi-annual evaluations. So really, it's doing a lot more than those milestones. And I think when you look at this list, what I think is daunting as a new program coordinator, program administrator, is how do you get this all together? And so that's the next part that I think is very important to talk about. How involved are you in the CCC? Are you on the CCC? Because in my book, every single one of you should be a non-voting member on the CCC. How many of you do you all participate? Who does not participate? I guess I should ask. Is there anyone that does not participate? Because we actually have had programs in our system that the PA does not participate. That's what we call our team here. So let's talk about best practices. What do you do to get ready for the clinical competencies committees? What do you gather? What data do you gather? Open for anybody.
We gather RTMS status. We gather procedure counts. We gather last time logged duty hours. We gather evaluations that were filled out, any concern cards and new innovations. We pull their ILPs just so that we have them in front of us when we're talking about the residents, and their previous either semi-annual review or milestone form.
Okay. Anybody, anything different? Anything unique to your programs you pull?
Wrong thing. Can you hear me? We're doing the wrong thing. We also gather the clinic staff evaluations of the residents also, and any patient evaluations that we receive back.
Okay. Yeah, I know my former institution, we used Press Ganey. So we would gather those Press Ganey results too with patient feedback on them.
In our program, we gather their learning modules that they complete, as well as direct observations.
Okay. All right. And how many of you like do an OSCE for your incoming or anything like that and use that for their first one? Anybody?
Oh, we do that.
Yeah. Procedure logs. Yeah. And that's going to be, all those things. The other thing you think about pre-CCC is not just gathering it, but when you're going to meet, right? How many of you schedule that way in advance, like a year in advance? And that was one of the best practices we did. At the beginning of February, we scheduled for an entire year, everything.
It's the same for us. We schedule ours at the beginning of the year for the whole year for all of our meetings.
Yeah,
We do that as
those
well.
on the calendar. Yep. Sonia, did you want to say something?
I said we do that as well. We probably meet a little bit more often. We actually ours are divided into teams, and we meet twice per team, and then they'd have their semi-annual review and we do the milestones right before that. So the CCC meets on them twice per academic year, in addition to the 2 semi-annuals.
Okay.
We actually meet monthly, and we review one PGY level at each for each month is a different PGY level. So that's what we do. So we meet monthly. Then of course we still have quarterly evals and evals at 6 months. We still do that, but we have a monthly CCC. 1 month is PGY 1, 1 month is PGY 2, 1 month is PGY 3. So we have it set up that way.
That's what I was going to talk about. I did that with my surgery program. We started with the PGY 5s and we went backwards so that we didn't hit the PGY 1s until November, December, because we had to get to know them. And then we started again. So we did, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we literally had 5 different CCCs because each of those years they rotated on different services. So for example, our PGY 3s, that was their primary year of pediatrics. So we brought in the pediatric faculty. So that's one way to think of it, something different to think about.
One other thing we do for our interns is we do a 90-day review. So usually we wait. So we'll have our first CCC of the academic year this Friday. In October, we do a 90-day review of just the interns, and we meet and just talk about everything involving them. And then they meet with their faculty advisor after, and then Dr. Knoll meets with them as well, just to kind of go through their first 90 days, just to do a pulse check and see how they're doing and what needs to be improved within that first 90 days.
Yep. So you have all that, right? You have pre-CCC, when are you going to meet? Who's included? Do you include different people, especially for like those that do different CCCs? Is it different team members on each group? You know, is 1 year more heavy OB? So you bring in the OB faculty. How do you do that? Does anyone do it that way where they have different makeups for their CCCs?
We just use core faculty. Yeah.
And then what data? We talked about that a little bit, you know, what you're pulling together. So what do they want to, you know, review? Here's the hard one. How will the meeting be conducted, or different one, right? So there's so many different ways you can do it. I think the most painful way is resident by resident, milestone by milestone, but there are programs that do that. You know, what tools can you do to make it more efficient? So how many of you have the milestones pre-filled out by someone before they come into the clinical competency committee? Does anyone do it that way?
We have
We
a
do.
we have a reviewer who goes through their assigned residents packet ahead and suggests where they think they would be, just to start the discussion.
Yep.
So
We
our
have-
advisors fill out the milestones ahead of time, and when we go into the meeting, and then we discuss and move as necessary. And it makes the meeting go that much faster. If you know my APD, you know she's a little OCD, so she has a checklist that she gives each of the advisors of things they need to review before each CCC.
Yeah, I send my residents, we send them a milestone self eval. And then when they meet with their advisor 1 to 2 weeks prior to the CCC meeting. And then their advisor goes over the milestones. We actually include our residents attend the CCC meeting with their advisor as their representation, so they know exactly where they are when, you know, we go over the milestones and ILP during the meeting, the CCC meeting with them.
So you hold one for each resident then?
Yeah, we have a 30-minute, so we'll do like a half day. We have 21 residents. So we'll do 3 half days, the core CCC plus the advisor and the advisee attend like each 30-minute. They have an assigned 30-minute session that they attend, and then we go over the milestones and then ask the resident, you know, if they have any, like, you know, if they have something to say about that they didn't agree or whatever. But usually it's through their advisor as like their representation. We just had, all the years that we had done it before, we had residents complain that it wasn't a transparent, like they would get these CCC, you know, their milestones, and then be kind of surprised by how low they, you know, might have been. And so we just tried to make it more of a transparent process. And then they meet with our PD 1 to 2 weeks after the CCC. Each resident meets with the PD and talks about future milestones, ILP, that type of kind of like the you know, kind of taking care of the semi-annual at the same time.
That's a very new one. I've not heard that one before. Does anyone else include residents in their CCC? I do like the transparency though.
Yeah, St. Peter Family Medicine does as well. They actually have the residents present on where they think they are. And then I think they have the CCC afterwards. And then so that, you know, they can provide, well, I'm not sure because I'm not in those meetings, but they do have the residents involved. And I think it is so that they can provide them with feedback on exactly where they're off on where they think they are.
So that rolls into like conducting the CCC. Like I asked, you know, is it pre-filled? Is it recording? You know, you do every single resident. Who records the comments? You know, we had a system where similar to some of you where the advisor filled it out and the advisor actually kept the comments for each of their advisees. It just made it easier because they knew that advisee and they knew what to focus on. And it actually turned out better than me keeping the notes on it because one, I'm not clinical. So half the time I didn't, I'd make mistakes and things I would write, but it actually worked out better that they kept their own notes. And then they were only keeping notes for 2 to 3 residents. So it wasn't trying to keep all 30 at one time. So who does the recording of the comments, and do you do, ahead of time, do you provide all of this, like for those of you that have it pre-filled, do you provide data for everybody to all the CCC members, or do you provide it just to the advisors, so that people can review if they had questions? Ours were our advisor everybody would have all the packets. They had access to it in Teams. We had a private channel. That way I wasn't printing and emailing a bunch of things. Each resident had a folder and they could go in and review. And that way, if their advisors say didn't know something, didn't have any knowledge of that, others could go in and look and read the reviews and, comment if they needed to. So that leads to the next questions for the news. For the new people, if you've done one already, where was your barrier? What did you feel like did not go well? Because this is your time now to pick the brains of the people who have been doing this for a while. And what do you think could be improved?
If I may, I think one of the things we struggle with here, I think the meetings go really well and the gathering the data, we don't have an issue with that. Our situation comes in where they meet with their advisor after the fact. They have 2 meetings. We had to institute something because the information we were gathering and reporting on and some of the suggestions we were making, things we were, corrective behaviors we were addressing, when it came to the advisor, that information wasn't being disseminated to the residents. So we had a lot of frustrated residents that it would come time for them to meet with our PD and they were blindsided because they didn't know where they were. So what we started doing is we did 2 things. We have the CCC chair that meets with them immediately after the meeting, like within 2 days, they go over everything and then they can meet with their advisor as well. It probably does seem redundant for some, but that way we make sure that they know exactly what they're dealing with and what they have to do. But one thing we started doing this academic year, and I do hope it helps, is we started using the portfolio reviews in New Innovations, and I just attach all the documents there. Notes can be made in that system, and then when the advisor reviews them, they make their own note about what was addressed, and we've got a paper trail without having actual documents. Everything's just in the system.
I think leveraging technology in that case, I'm a big proponent of leveraging technology. Someone mentioned, Nina said, we spend too much time on residents on PIPs and then run out of time for quarterly reviews. How many of you have been there, done that? So I think that one is hard because you do want to discuss the ones on plans, right? And make sure they're following through their plan. But I also think that that does kind of make the others that are doing fine lose out a little bit on feedback. And I always think that's really important, So how do you balance that? Anyone have suggestions for that? Trinity?
Yeah, hi everyone. One thing that we have found in the last several years that's helped at our programs is that we actually have a separate committee for residents that are needing a little bit of extra help or that are having significant difficulty. And we work with the CCC to let them know what's going on when it comes to that, but it helps a lot with keeping your CCC meetings from turning into the Academic Remediation Advisory Council. And there is overlap in membership between the two. So for example, myself and the PD are both on I chair that advisory committee, and it's interdisciplinary, and that has helped a lot with that. And also helps too with making sure that the really confidential things that can often happen for a resident in difficulty, because it's never just they're not doing their work. There's often like ADA, FMLA, other things going on there. Helps keep those things confidential, which in a smaller program, smaller institution can be hard. So we share as needed, but we found that to be really effective.
Yep. And then someone else mentioned, Joanna said we divide our CCC to 2 meetings and set time schedule to avoid that issue. I do know I've had programs that set times per resident. Like you literally had X amount of time per resident. Becky, what did you have?
So we have two faculty meetings every week. Um, and when we do our evals for either milestones or semi-annuals, one meeting is directed only towards the evaluating of the residents, or CCC. The other one is just a faculty meeting. So that kind of helps us if we find something going on in the CCC with a resident and we need to start a PIP or we need to do something like that, we can always drag it to the next meeting, where we can focus on like other stuff that's going around on in our clinic, or anything that we need to kind of put together for a PIP or an ILP or something like that. But we definitely dedicate just one meeting specifically to doing all the milestones or all the semi-annual reviews for each resident. That way we don't get lost in the weeds, if you will.
And so what Tiffany said, that they have the same type of subcommittee that meets. I think a lot of programs have gone to that. I think it makes it easier to keep track of those residents on the plans. But that is a very good best practice, I think, to try out if you haven't. They can do those milestones and then you just discuss as needed. But that's another one. The other thing is post CCC, and this did not come over, recording the milestones into ACGME. Obviously, we have to do that. Preparing the semi-annual review documents also goes after the CCC, and then updating information, right? So if a person's been put on a plan, you're updating that. If a person's been given permission to moonlight, you're updating that. If a person's been, you've updated their privileges, they now qualify for the GE modifier, all those things, you're updating all that documentation. If they're changing their learning plan, their individualized learning plan, if they've decided to shift focus, you're going to change those there as well. But how do you stay organized? And this is the question for all of you. Do you live put those milestones into your resident, your software, your new innovations, your MedHub as the meeting is going on? Do you do it on a spreadsheet? Do you do it? Where do you do it? And how do you make sure you keep it accurate?
We have a form for capturing those, and a resident reviewer sheet that I complete sort of as notes or for the minutes during the meeting, and those are recorded at the time they're assigned.
And then Cassie said that the faculty that reviews enters them live in MedHub. Anyone else do different? I know sometimes it feels like you're triple data entering, but I actually entered them in a spreadsheet that everybody could see and then had them review it before I put them into our software and the ACGME, just to make sure I didn't make a typo. Jennifer says
as we go along.
Yeah.
And so I finalize it during the CCC meeting. I'm the one that keeps track of all the changes that we make, and they watch. We're in a room. I put it on screen and they watch me as I make the changes and stuff. And then they tell me if it's good to go. And if it is, I just complete it and then I'll just upload it after the meeting.
How many of
you advisor, I'm sorry, Melissa?
You use, I know Lisa Ann uses New Innovations.
Yes.
Do you use the flags in the comments as you do them?
Yeah, if we need to.
Yeah, we do the
Anybody
same.
else? I don't know how MedHub looks, but in New Innovations, you can flag where there may be like a deficiency or, kind of thing, and then put a note what they're missing. Yeah. And I found that was very helpful to flag it and put a note in there.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. And our meetings go pretty fast. We tend to spend our time, if somebody is on a PIP or an ILP or whatever you want to call it, during our faculty meetings. And that's where we put the majority of that time. So the CCC is just pretty quick if they're following their ILP and stuff.
And Patrice enters it into a spreadsheet from the advisor's input and the milestones form. And then when you enter them to the ACGME, it took me a year before I realized you could turn off the narrative. And so it wasn't hovering over everything you did. Because that used to drive me crazy. So I will admit I did not know that right away. It took me a year before I figured that out. And then the second thing is, do you have a second set of eyes look it over?
Yeah, I meet the PD and I do them, like I pre-enter them on the ACGME site without submitting, and then we review them based on new innovations and make sure everything looks good, and then submit them from there.
The only reason I ask is we just had an instance where they were vastly different, where they, I think, skipped a line on one of my programs, not family medicine, but so now, PDs are a little bit freaking out to make sure they look them over one more time. But it can happen. I mean, it happens to everybody. Okay, so now sharing is caring. What is your favorite thing you do to make your CCC run smoothly? Do you feed them? Is that your favorite thing? What do you do?
I keep everybody on track.
I'm not surprised. I fed mine. It was, we'd had lunch together, which that always made them happy. And I always make sure to have carbs so that they were in a good mood. Snacks and coffee are a must, yes.
We also have food. We have to have food. That's the key to everything for my physicians and faculty is food.
I used to, what's the movie with Kevin Costner? If you build it, they will come. If you feed them, they will come. Okay, Nina, did you have anything? Nina's only been around for one so far. So anything that you had a problem with on that first one that you want to pick the brains or talk about? And Joanna's going to request snacks. Yeah. It makes them happier.
Never thought about it. They just grab their food and bring it with them usually, but maybe I should have snacks. Maybe that's like the key.
I did theme snacks. Like one time it was chips and salsa and guacamole, that kind of stuff. I'd make it themed. One day I
That's a
did
great
milk
idea.
and cookies, however you say it.
Like a little party.
So yeah, ran out of time. Nina says ran out of time. And I think if you find that, you could even say, we've been on this resident for 15 minutes. We have 5 more to go. Maybe we come back to this one at a later time.
So we set a time limit. We say we have 9 residents to do. We have this much time to do it. That means we have this many minutes on each resident. And that's why I'm the timekeeper. We're getting close to that time. We got to get going. And
We're only on patient care 2 or what?
Yeah.
Yep. I'm like, are we done discussing this? We've gone off on a tangent. Can we keep going?
Can we get a number? Where are we at, guys?
Right.
Something we need to take to a different committee to talk about when it's something big, maybe.
Uh-huh.
We give 5 minutes per reviewer per resident, and we started adding a mini CCC after every unit director meeting that we have, which is once per block. We add a 30-minute at the end to talk regularly about, any issues. That way the CCC moves faster.
Did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, so we do 1 hour blocks and we try to get 4 to 5 done in that 1 hour block. As long as we can get through 4 in 1 hour, we're pretty much on time. So I mean, I just have to keep reminding people, like, do we have a number or are we just talking words? Because like I don't know what your words translate to a number. So like we need to get a number here. I mean, when you guys are done discussing,
Are you a 3? Are you a 3.5? Where are
let's
we?
go.
Come on.
Where are we?
Yes.
And then sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, maybe a 3, maybe a 2.5. So I'll just start reading what a number 3 is. And like, are they doing XYZ? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? Have they done this? And then I kind of get them moving a little bit so that they know, like, we need to get to the next one. We've already been talking about this, but as long as we can get through 4 in an hour, we usually take about 5 weeks of 1 hour block. So 5 hours to get through all 21 of our residents.
The other question I had, and it just flew out my brain. I'll come back to it.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when we do ours, so like I said before, we do one PGY level at a time during that. But what about programs we're duly accredited? So you have your allopathic and osteopathic milestones. So for those that have who are duly accredited, how do you handle? Because I have 18 residents total. I have 18 residents total, but I have 14 that are osteopathic recognition also. So I have the two sets of milestones, extra sets of evaluations, extra sets of, additional, I shouldn't say extra, additional. So the programs who are duly accredited, how do you handle that? And I don't know if any new coordinators that are on now, if they're with a duly accredited program, and how are they handling that?
I am not, so anybody who does. Trinity does the same, they do them at the same time that they do.
Yeah, we do
And then
ours at the same
Cassie,
time
one
also.
day,
We
you
do
do one
ours
day for each.
same time as well. We
Oh, and then you
ours-
do a DO day. Okay.
We just
Emmeline?
run them through.
Yeah, St. Peter is duly accredited, and that's what they do. I believe they do both of the CCCs at the same time.
Yep, we do ours at the same time as well. We just make sure that on our CCC is at least 1 to 2 DO committee members to speak on behalf for the DO milestone sections. And we go through the milestones and we do the DO milestones at the same time on that resident.
All right. And so I'm going to ask the seniors, not senior age, senior in experience on here. What is probably the best piece of advice you would give a new person doing a CCC?
Do not stress.
Pamela.
Do not
Not
stress.
stress.
But I like I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. That said, keep everything on time, but you don't stress. But if you keep it on time, it will all be okay for you. You'll be okay. Just keep it on time and just don't stress. You will be okay. You will come out of the meeting alive.
Agreed.
I would say, as Becky just mentioned earlier, you got to keep them on track. You got to say, what's the number? What's the number? What's the number? You got to push them because they'll just sit and talk for hours. And sometimes they get mad at you for doing that. But you're like, you know what? We got things to do. You want to be done by 4:30? You better start talking. So
I agree with that
Yeah.
one, Pamela. I always say it sounds like we're saying the same thing over and over. What's the number? Let's move on. Because a lot of times it is, well, oh yeah, and they did this and then they did that. You're like, okay, what's the number? Prep and stay focused for them. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd say, usually I say, okay, we've talked about this. Are we moving this or not? Let's go on to the next one. Because they'll go down a rabbit hole if you let them.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I think providing as much documentation ahead of time as you can is the best practice. Get them as much info as you can. It makes it so much easier for them to make a decision if they have. I also think one of the takeaways from it is if you start realizing, I'll give you a good one. We had I think it was systems-based practice one, the one that talks on money. Like, are they aware of the cost of things? Is that one? We realized we had no way of judging that. We weren't doing a good job of that. So it helped us do we did clinic shift cards. We added that to one of our clinic shift cards because then it did prompt discussion and make sure that they were going, the preceptors as they were adding things and ordering things like, are you aware of the cost of this? And have you checked into the cost of this? So, it does help you look at what you're missing too. So it helps you identify those gaps so that maybe you do adjust your evaluations or adjust how you're doing evaluations. I will say,
oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the things that we find when we do our milestones is where the program falls short. And we can see that on that spider graph with new innovations, and it will show us like what, and we, like you just mentioned, Melissa, we will say, this is a programmatic issue. This is not, residents aren't not doing this because they're not doing it. It's just that we do a bad job of doing it. And so it's stuff that we talk about in our APE and our PEC.
Yep. Yep. Definitely use those spider graphs. Those are fantastic if you have them from New Innovations.
I also noticed when we were doing those spider graphs, we see like that there's you know, a little bit of a lull in some of our milestones. You know, keeping in perspective that there are some milestones that our faculty aren't even meeting yet.
Yes.
Right? Advocacy is a big one in most programs. And so, you know, I try to keep reminding them like half of you are not a 3 here. So like, what are we expecting from our residents if we're not doing it, how do you expect the residents to be doing it? So it definitely shows you where there's lulls in your program for sure.
Yep. Or yeah, like I said, evaluations, or even in the program, how you're doing this, or it shows you where maybe there's a gap in a year, like, oh, the second and third years get this, but the first years don't. We can't judge them on this yet. We can't evaluate them. So yes. The one I know what slipped my mind, how many of you provide feedback on the milestones? And I think that's one thing, especially on the professionalism and the communications. You are very much part of that and can provide feedback on that in ways that I think sometimes the faculty don't see because they are different, you know, in getting some of the behind the scene things done.
At our program, though, we've taken to like if I need to get something from a resident and I don't wait until like the fifth email. I actually CC the advisor and our APD on every email that goes to the residents for things that they need so that the advisor can be on top of what I'm needing and the APD just so she has awareness. And I know it fills up their inboxes, but they want this. They asked for this. They want to be kept on track. And so because our faculty are very hands-on with our residents, they expect them to be adult learners, but they also ask, they want to know what's going on. So if they see something that's professionally happening, i.e. not doing their paperwork or not responding to me when I'm emailing, they want to nip that in the bud right away.
And it sounds like a lot of you do that. And then Patrice also said, I will notify advisors of kudos also, which is great because sometimes we hear those that maybe they don't get to hear. Or
Yeah,
if somebody does
advisors
something
and PDs
early,
and
I
APDs.
will definitely chime in if they've done something above and beyond or got something done early. Then finally, for the new people, do you have any questions at all? I think one of the biggest things I would say is leverage technology where you can. You know, use your technology. I think also a lot of you are doing the same thing. It sounds like, you know, having them pre-filled out if you can with, you know, from the advisor or from a small subcommittee. However, that does make it go a lot faster that you only discuss the ones that maybe there's questions about, or maybe if they're going backwards or they're not progressing, you might discuss those. The other thing you know, and I don't know if any of you've run into this, we had a situation where they were afraid to make a resident go backwards on the milestones, but it was clearly a professionalism issue and we put them back down to a 1 on something, you know, so don't be afraid. It does not have to be linear progression.
Agreed.
I also had
We've
a
done
former
that as
PD
well.
that were all the 2s were 2s and the 3s were 3s and this was an internal medicine, but you know. One final note, we just had a site visit here at one of my programs, and make sure you are not relying heavily on the milestones on your evaluations. They're not to be evaluation tools because they did bring that up several times. The site visitor did. They can be part of your evaluations, but they should not be all of your evaluations. So just a friendly reminder. I know y'all aren't doing that, but just in case. Stacy, or anybody have a question? Oh, it was my little hand over, Stacy. Nina, anything? All right. Well, I hope you all have a lovely Monday. I hope this was helpful. I wanted it to be interactive because I clearly, we all come from different ways and different ways of doing things. And I think one of the best way to learn is from each other. I will say I was recently at the AFMRD meeting, and which is the residency directors, for those of you that don't know, and they praised our organization, AFMA, for how involved we are and how much we put out communications and how you guys often know things before they do. So way to go. And I swear it's our listserv. So thank you all for all you do. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.